When I called my son to ask what time I should arrive for my grandson's graduation party, the line went dead silent. Then came his wife's laugh in the background, sharp and cold like breaking glass. "Oh, Wallace," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "the party was last Saturday. We didn't want to bother you with all the noise." A week later, they were on their knees in my driveway, begging for mercy. I looked down at them, the people who thought I was nothing but a burden, and said 3 words. "Get off my property." Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. I sat at my mahogany desk, the smell of lemon oil and old leather filling the room. My hands, weathered from 40 years of civil engineering and bridge building, moved with practiced precision. I was polishing a vintage Patek Philippe pocket watch. It had belonged to my father, and today it was going to belong to Tyler. My grandson was graduating high school with honors. This watch was more than a gift. It was a torch being passed. I had spent the morning ironing my best suit, the charcoal one I hadn't worn since my wife Catherine's funeral 3 years ago. I checked the time, 2 in the afternoon. The party was supposed to start at 4, according to the vague text message my son Bradley had sent 2 weeks ago, but he hadn't sent the address or the final confirmation. I picked up the phone and dialed Bradley's number. It rang 4 times. I imagined him running around, maybe setting up the balloons or checking the catering. He finally answered, but his voice was tight. "Hey, Dad. Is everything okay?" I smiled, shifting the phone to my other ear. "Everything is fine, son. I am just checking the time. I have the watch ready for Tyler. Should I come over around 3:30 to help set up?" There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable silence that made the air in my study feel suddenly thin. In the background, I heard music. I heard the clinking of silverware. And I heard Monica, my daughter-in-law. Her voice was muffled, but I have the hearing of a man who used to listen for stress fractures in concrete. "Tell him we are busy," she hissed. "Tell him to stay home." Bradley cleared his throat. "Dad, actually, plans changed. We decided to keep it really small. Just us and some of Tyler's friends. It's going to be loud and chaotic. Honestly, it is not your scene. We will come visit you next Sunday for coffee, okay?" My grip on the phone tightened. "Just you and Tyler's friends, yeah. Exactly. Low key. You know how it is. Look, I have to go, Dad. Love you." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the silence of my empty house pressing against my eardrums. Low key. Small. I looked down at the Patek Philippe. It gleamed under the desk lamp, a useless artifact of a time when promises meant something. I almost believed him. I wanted to believe him. Bradley was my only son. I had paid for his college. I had put down the 40% down payment on his house in Greenwich. Surely he wouldn't lie to me about his own son's milestone. Then my iPad chimed. It was a Facebook notification. I rarely used the thing, but Catherine had set it up years ago so we could see photos of the grandkids. I slid the screen open. The algorithm, cruel in its efficiency, pushed a post to the top of my feed. It was from Monica, posted 10 minutes ago. The caption read, "The perfect celebration for our genius Tyler. So blessed to be surrounded by all our friends and family. Hashtag future leader, hashtag Ivy League bound." My finger hovered over the screen. I tapped the photos. There were dozens of them. And it was not a small gathering, it was a gala. There was a white tent set up on the lawn of the house I helped buy. There were waiters in black vests carrying trays of champagne. There was a jazz band. And there were people, hundreds of them. I recognized faces. Some were Bradley's colleagues, some were neighbors. I even saw my old accountant smiling with a drink in his hand. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. I zoomed in on one photo. Bradley and Monica were standing on either side of Tyler. Monica was wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was beaming, her hand resting possessively on Tyler's shoulder. Bradley looked proud, holding a glass of scotch. But Tyler, my grandson, looked miserable. He was holding his diploma, but his eyes weren't looking at the camera. He was looking down. I felt a coldness spread from my chest to my fingertips. It wasn't sadness. Sadness is what I felt when Catherine died. This was different. This was the cold, hard clarity of a structural engineer realizing the foundation is rotten. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me. I stood up. My knees popped, a reminder of my 68 years, but I didn't feel the pain. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I walked to the closet, but I didn't reach for the charcoal suit. That suit was for a respected father and grandfather. That man wasn't invited. Instead, I grabbed my keys. Not the keys to the sedan, but the keys to my 1998 Ford F-150. The truck I used to inspect construction sites. The truck Monica hated because she said it looked like poverty. I needed to see it with my own eyes. The drive to Greenwich usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 15. As I turned onto their street lined with oak trees and manicured hedges, the reality hit me. The party wasn't just over. It was the aftermath. The white tent was still up, flapping lazily in the wind. A catering truck was loading up tables. I pulled my truck up to the curb, right behind a sleek black Mercedes. I didn't get out immediately. I watched. I saw the garbage bags piled high by the driveway. I saw the excess. Clear plastic bags filled with half-eaten lobster tails, imported cheeses, and empty bottles of Dom Perignon. I did the math in my head. That was a $50,000 party. At least. And last week, Bradley had told me he couldn't afford to pay back the monthly installment of the loan I gave him. I stepped out of the truck. The air smelled of stale wine and expensive perfume. I walked up the driveway, my boots crunching on the gravel. The front door was open. A cleaning crew was moving in and out. I saw Maria, the housekeeper, who had been with them since Tyler was a baby. She was carrying a heavy bag of linens. When she saw me, she nearly dropped it. "Mr. Wallace," she gasped. She looked terrified. She glanced back toward the house as if checking for a guard dog. "You shouldn't be here. Mrs. Monica, she's upstairs sleeping." I looked at Maria. She was a good woman. She always made sure to send me photos of Tyler when the parents weren't looking. "Maria," I said gently, "why wasn't I invited?" She bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, Mr. Wallace, don't make me say it. Tell me, Maria. I need to know." She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Mrs. Monica told everyone you were sick. She told the guests you have dementia. She said you get confused and aggressive and that it would be too much for Tyler to handle on his big day. She said it was an act of mercy to leave you at home." Dementia. The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. They hadn't just excluded me. They had killed my reputation to cover their own vanity. They painted me as a senile invalid so they wouldn't have to explain why the man who paid for the roof over their heads wasn't standing there. "Thank you, Maria," I said. My voice was steady, shockingly steady. I turned around and walked back to my truck. I didn't storm inside. I didn't scream. Screaming is for people who are helpless. I wasn't helpless. I was calculating. I needed to see Tyler. I knew his schedule. Monday afternoon. He would be at the high school library returning his books before the summer break. He always went there to escape the noise of his parents. I drove to the school and waited in the parking lot. When I saw him walking out, shoulders hunched, carrying a stack of textbooks, my heart broke a little. He didn't look like a boy who had just graduated. He looked like a man carrying a weight he didn't understand. I honked the horn lightly. Tyler looked up. When he saw the old Ford, his face lit up for a split second, then immediately clouded with worry. He ran over, looking over his shoulder. "Grandpa," he whispered, leaning into the window. "You can't be here. If Mom finds out I talked to you, she'll freak out. Get in, Tyler. Just for a minute." He hesitated, then climbed into the passenger seat. The cab of the truck smelled of old coffee and sawdust, a smell Tyler used to love when he was a boy. He slumped against the seat. "I saw the photos, Tyler," I said. He flinched. "I wanted you there, Grandpa. I swear. I fought them on it. I told them I didn't want a party if you weren't coming. Then why?" I asked. "Why did they lie to me? Why did they tell people I was sick?" Tyler looked down at his hands. He was picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "Because of the investors, Grandpa. What investors? Dad is trying to launch that new marketing firm. He invited a guy named Mr. P. I don't know his full name. Big shot real estate guy." Mom said. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling. "Mom said that Mr. P is all about image. She said she said you look blue-collar. She said if you showed up in your old truck and told your stories about mixing cement, the investors would think we are low-class. She said you would embarrass them." I stared through the windshield at the brick wall of the high school. Embarrass them. I, who had built the bridges that allowed these people to commute to their high-rise offices. I, who had worked 16-hour shifts in the freezing rain so Bradley could go to private school. I was now a blemish on their brand. And Dad? I asked, though I already knew the answer. "What did your father say?" Tyler wiped a tear from his cheek. Dad said Mom was right. He said this party was about networking, not family. He said you served your purpose and now they need to focus on the future. Served my purpose. Like a tool that had rusted out. Like a scaffolding that is torn down once the building is finished. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Patek Philippe. I pressed it into Tyler's hand. "Happy graduation, kid." "Grandpa, I can't take this." "Mom will sell it. She sells everything you give me." "Keep it hidden," I said. "Hide it where you hide your true self, Tyler. Because you are going to need a reminder of who you really are when the storm comes. And believe me, a storm is coming." I drove Tyler home, dropping him off a block away so he wouldn't be seen. As I drove back to my empty house, the sadness evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They wanted to play games with image. They wanted to talk about net worth and assets, fine. They saw me as a senile old man. They forgot that before I was a retiree, I was the chief engineer. I knew how to build things, but more importantly, I knew exactly where to place the dynamite to bring a structure down. I walked into my study and opened the safe behind the painting of the Hudson River. I pulled out a thick red folder. It contained the deed to their house, the loan agreements, and the power of attorney documents Bradley had signed 5 years ago when he was almost bankrupt the first time. I picked up the phone again. But this time, I wasn't calling my son. I was calling Evelyn Shaw, the most ruthless litigator in the state of Connecticut. "Evelyn," I said when she answered. "It's Wallace." "Wallace, I haven't heard from you in months. Is everything all right?" "No, Evelyn. Everything is wrong. But I am about to make it right. I need you to look into Bradley's financials. I want to know every debt, every credit card, every lien, and Evelyn, prepare the foreclosure papers on the Greenwich property." There was a pause on the line, followed by the sound of a lighter clicking and a long exhale of smoke. "I always liked your timing, Wallace," she said. "I will clear my schedule." I hung up the phone. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my lawn. They wanted a life without me. They were about to find out exactly how much that life cost. The party was over. The lesson was just beginning. The automatic glass doors of First Republic Bank slid open with a hush, admitting me into the air-conditioned silence. It was 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. The lobby was empty, save for a security guard who nodded at me and a teller counting a stack of fresh bills. I walked straight to the glass-walled office at the back. I did not have an appointment, but when you have banked with the same institution for 40 years, You do not need one. Mr. Clark. The branch manager looked up from his computer. He was a young man, perhaps 30, with a tie that was too wide and a smile that was too practiced. When he saw me, the smile faltered for a fraction of a second. It was a micro-expression, the kind a poker player tries to hide, but I caught it. He knew something. Mr. King, he said, standing up and extending a hand that felt damp. What a surprise. I thought you were… Well, I heard you were not feeling well. I ignored his hand and sat in the leather chair opposite his desk. My son tells a lot of stories, Mr. Clark. I am fit as a fiddle. I am here to check on the Tyler King Education Trust. Clark swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. He sat down slowly, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. The Education Trust. Right. Of course. Is there a specific transaction you are looking for? I do not want a specific transaction, I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on his mahogany desk. I want the total balance. My grandson starts college in 3 months. I intend to cut a cashier's check for his tuition today. The typing sound was loud in the quiet room. Click, clack, click. Clark stared at the screen, and I watched the color drain from his face. He cleared his throat. Mr. King, I am confused. The account was closed last Thursday. The air in the room seemed to freeze. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I pushed it down. Closed, I asked, my voice dropping an octave. That is a trust fund, Mr. Clark. It requires my signature and a witness to access. Who closed it? Clark turned the monitor toward me. I looked at the digital scan of a withdrawal slip. The amount was $250,000, the entire balance, and at the bottom in blue ink was a signature. Wallace King. It was a good forgery. I had to give them that. But it was sloppy in the details. The tail of the G in King looped the wrong way. It was the way I signed my name 20 years ago, not now. They had traced it from an old document. That is not my signature, I said. Clark looked terrified. But Sir Mr. Bradley came in with the power of attorney documents. He said you were incapacitated. He had a notarized letter from a doctor stating you were unfit to manage your finances due to cognitive decline. Cognitive decline. The lie at the party was not just an excuse to keep me away. It was a legal strategy. They had built a narrative of dementia to bypass the bank's security protocols. Show me the doctor's note, I demanded. Clark clicked another file. It was signed by a Dr. A.J. Soprano. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. That was the name of a character from a TV show. They had bought a fake medical certificate from some back alley mill, and this bank had accepted it without calling me. I stood up. Mr. Clark, print everything. Every withdrawal, every transfer, and a copy of that fraudulent power of attorney. You are going to freeze any other accounts associated with my name immediately. If a single penny leaves this bank, I will sue this institution until the only thing left is the ATM outside. 30 minutes later, I walked out with a thick manila envelope. The sun was shining on the pavement, but I felt like I was walking through a thunderstorm. My son had not just stolen money. He had stolen my identity. He had declared me mentally incompetent to rob his own son. I drove straight to downtown Greenwich. I did not go to the police station. Not yet. The police are a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I needed Evelyn Shaw. Evelyn's office was on the top floor of a steel and glass tower. She was 70 years old, 5 years my senior, and she was the most terrifying woman in Connecticut. She did not have a receptionist. She did not believe in them. I walked into her office and found her standing by the window looking out at the city she had spent 50 years suing. She didn't turn around when I entered. I heard you were dead or crazy. Wallace, she said, her voice raspy from decades of unfiltered cigarettes. Which is it? I tossed the manila envelope onto her glass desk. It landed with a heavy thud. Neither. I am just angry. Evelyn turned. She wore a sharp white suit that made her look like a spectral force of justice. She sat down, put on her reading glasses, and opened the envelope. She read in silence. The only sound was the turning of pages. Her expression never changed. She was a statue of concentration. After 10 minutes, she closed the folder. "This is sloppy," she said. "Bradley was always a mediocre liar. But this is desperate. He didn't just forge a signature, Wallace. He committed wire fraud, bank fraud, and elder abuse. That is 15 years in federal prison minimum." "That is just the tip of the iceberg," I said. "I want you to run a full asset search. I want to know what else he has done." Evelyn turned to her computer. "I have already started. I saw the alert on your credit report this morning. That is why I was expecting you." She spun the screen around. I looked at a web of numbers and lines that made my stomach churn. "Let's look at the anatomy of the disaster," Evelyn said, pointing a manicured finger at the screen. "This is your house, the farmhouse on Elm Street. You own it outright, correct?" I nodded. "I paid off the mortgage in 1998. "Not anymore," Evelyn said. 6 months ago, a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, was taken out against the property. Value of $400,000. The maximum limit." "How?" I asked. "The deed is in my name." Evelyn clicked a document. "They forged a quitclaim deed. They transferred the title to a shell company called WK Holdings, presumably Wallace King Holdings, and then Bradley, as the director of that company, took out the loan. He used your own house as an ATM, and Wallace, he hasn't made a single payment. The bank has already issued a notice of default. You are 30 days away from foreclosure." Foreclosure. The word hung in the air. My home. The place where I raised my son. The place where Catherine planted her hydrangeas. They had gambled it away without even telling me. "There is more." Evelyn continued, her voice devoid of pity, just cold facts. "Look at these credit cards. 5 of them. All opened in your name in the last year. Total debt is $80,000. And here is the kicker. Look at where the money is going." I leaned in. The statements showed transfers to a company called Prestige Global Realty. "I know that name," I said. "That is the company owned by Mr. P, the investor they were trying to impress at the party." Evelyn nodded. "Exactly. It's a Ponzi scheme, Wallace. A high-yield real estate investment scam. Bradley is not just spending money on lifestyle. He is trying to buy his way into a club that doesn't exist. He took your liquid cash, the trust fund, and the equity in your home, and he dumped it all into this Prestige Global Realty. He thinks he is an investor. In reality, he is the mark." I sat back, feeling the weight of the betrayal crushing my ribs. It wasn't just greed. It was stupidity. Arrogant, blinding stupidity. He had burned down our entire legacy to buy magic beans. "Can we stop the foreclosure?" I asked. Evelyn lit a cigarette, ignoring the smoke detector above her head. "We can do better than that. We can prove fraud. Since the deed transfer was forged, the mortgage is invalid. We can get your house back. But to do that, we have to file a police report. We have to formally accuse Bradley of a felony. Once we pull that trigger, Wallace, there is no going back. He will go to jail." I looked out the window at the city below. I saw the bridges I had built. Steel and concrete. They stood because they followed the laws of physics. If you cheat the laws of physics, the bridge collapses. It was that simple. Bradley had tried to cheat the laws of life. "I am not sending him to jail yet," I said quietly. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You are going to let him get away with it?" "No," I said. "Jail is too easy. In jail, he is a victim. He can blame the system. He can blame me. I want him to understand exactly what he has done. I want to strip him of his illusions first. I looked at Evelyn. Buy the debt. Excuse me, you heard me? The bank wants to foreclose on the house, fine. Use my remaining assets. The bonds, the retirement accounts I kept secret. Buy the non-performing note from the bank. I want to be the one holding the mortgage. I want to be the one holding the lien on his own house, too. Evelyn smiled. A slow, shark-like smile. You want to become his creditor. I want to own him, I said. I want to own the debt, the house, the cars, everything. When the house of cards falls, I want to be the one deciding who gets crushed by the debris. Evelyn typed furiously. It will take 48 hours to set up the shell corporation to buy the debt, so he doesn't know it is you. We will call it Nemesis, else call it the Foundation, I said, because that is what I am taking back. She printed out a stack of papers. One more thing, Wallace. The power of attorney he used. We need to revoke it. But if we revoke it publicly, the bank notifies him. Don't revoke it yet, I said. Let him think he is safe. Let him think the money is still flowing. I want him to feel secure. I want him to walk into that meeting with Mr. P thinking he is a millionaire. Evelyn handed me a pen. You are a dangerous man, Wallace King. I signed the retainer agreement. The ink was black and permanent. I am not dangerous, Evelyn. I am just a father who has to teach his son a lesson he should have learned 20 years ago. You do not steal from the hand that feeds you. As I left her office, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Bradley. Hey, Dad, sorry about the mix-up with the party. Monica is feeling bad. Maybe we can do dinner next month. Hope you are resting. I looked at the message. Next month. He thought he had a month. He thought he had a future. He didn't know that I had just bought his past, his present, and his destruction. I didn't reply. I put the phone in my pocket and walked to my truck. The city noise faded, replaced by the roar of my engine. I had the evidence. I had the strategy. Now I just needed to tighten the noose. The investor meeting was in 2 days. I knew where it was, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. But first I had to secure the only thing that mattered. Tyler. I needed to make sure that when the walls came down, he wasn't standing in the blast zone. I drove back towards the suburbs, the skyline retreating in my rearview mirror. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood red. It was fitting. The night was coming for Bradley King, and he had no idea that the monster under his bed was the man who used to check for monsters under his bed. The name Prestige Global Realty sounded impressive, but in my line of work, the flashier the name, the hollower, the foundation. I sat in my truck, the engine idling, staring at the address listed on the wire transfer documents Evelyn had uncovered. It wasn't a skyscraper. It wasn't a financial district headquarters. It was a mail drop in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner and a discount liquor store. I felt a cold smirk touch my lips. My son, the marketing genius, the man who claimed to understand the complexities of modern finance, was funneling our family fortune into a mailbox. But a mailbox is just a mouth. I needed to know who was at the other end waiting to be fed. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a decade. It belonged to an old contact at the county clerk's office, a woman named Sarah, who knew every plot of land and every dirty deal in Greenwich since 1980. Sarah, it's Wallace King, I said. Wallace, she answered, her voice warm but surprised. I heard you retired. I heard you were out of the game. I finished for her. Not quite. I need a favor, Sarah. I need to know who is behind a shell company called Prestige Global, and I need to know if they have filed any inquiries regarding my property on Elm Street. There was the sound of typing on the other end. Give me a minute, Wallace. You know the system is slower than it used to be. I waited. The seconds ticked by like a countdown. I watched people walking in and out of the liquor store, oblivious to the fact that their lives were simple compared to the web I was currently unraveling. Wallace, Sarah said, and her tone had changed. It was lower. Serious. You are not going to like this. Prestige Global is a holding entity. The primary shareholder is a man named Gordon Pierce. The name hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Gordon Pierce. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I wasn't sitting in my truck anymore. I was back on a construction site 25 years ago. Gordon Pierce had been my subcontractor on the Hudson Bridge project. He was a man who believed that profit margins were more important than safety regulations. I had caught him mixing sand into the concrete to cut costs. I fired him on the spot. I reported him to the licensing board. I effectively ended his career as a legitimate builder. He had screamed at me as security dragged him off the site. He swore he would make me pay. He swore he would take apart everything I built brick by brick. I had forgotten him. He was just a bad memory, a footnote in a long career. But he hadn't forgotten me. He is not just an investor, is he? Sarah, I asked, my grip on the steering wheel turning my knuckles white. No, she said. He is a developer now, or rather a land speculator. And Wallace, there is more. A zoning application was filed 3 days ago. It is a request to rezone your 50-acre farm from residential agricultural to commercial mixed use. The application outlines a plan to demolish the farmhouse and build a strip mall. Demolish. My house. The house where I carried Catherine across the threshold. The house where Tyler took his first steps. The garden where Catherine's prize roses still bloomed every spring. Pierce didn't just want money. He wanted to pave over my memories. He wanted to turn my life's work into a parking lot. Who signed the application, I asked, though I already felt the sickness rising in my throat. Sarah hesitated. It was signed by Bradley King, acting as power of attorney for Wallace King. The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just that Bradley was stealing money. It was that he had made a deal with the devil. He had sold his father to the one man who hated me most in this world. And for what, I hung up the phone and drove. I didn't go home. I drove to the one place Bradley wouldn't expect me. I went to his office, or rather the expensive co-working space he rented to look successful. I walked past the receptionist who tried to stop me. I found Bradley in a glass-walled conference room. He was laughing, leaning back in his chair, talking to a man on a video call. On the screen was Gordon Pierce. Older now, balding, but with the same shark-like eyes I remembered. I stood outside the glass watching them. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. Bradley looked eager, desperate to please. Pierce looked like a predator playing with its food. I saw Bradley hold up a thick roll of blueprints. My blueprints. My heart stopped. Those weren't just any drawings. Those were the original schematics for the patent I held on suspension bridge tension systems. It was my intellectual property. It was the legacy I had planned to leave to Tyler, something that would generate royalties for him for decades. Bradley was handing them over. He was showing them to Pierce. I realized then the depth of Bradley's stupidity. He didn't know what he was holding. To him, they were just old papers, a sweetener for the deal. He was trading a multi-million-dollar patent for a quick cash infusion to pay off his gambling debts. Pierce knew. I saw the greed in Pierce's eyes on the screen. He was about to get the land and the technology for pennies on the dollar, and he was using my own son to do it. I stepped back into the shadows before Bradley could see me. If I stormed in there now, I would stop the transaction, but I wouldn't stop the war. Pierce would just find another way. Bradley would just find another lie. No. I needed them to think they had won. I walked back to my truck, my mind racing with a cold mathematical precision. Bradley thought he was a partner. Pierce thought he was a conqueror. They were both wrong. They were just heavy loads on a bridge that was about to snap. I took out my phone and called Evelyn again. Change of plans, I said. Wallace, You sound different. I know who the buyer is, as I said. It's Gordon Pierce. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. The man you got disbarred. Wallace, this isn't business. This is a vendetta. Exactly, I said. He wants the farm, and he wants my patents. Bradley is handing them over this Friday at the closing. We have to stop the closing, Evelyn said. We can get an emergency injunction. No, I said. Let it proceed. Are you insane? She hissed. You will lose everything. I won't lose anything, I said, watching Bradley walk out of the building, a smug smile plastered on his face. Because Bradley doesn't own the farm, and he doesn't own the patents. He is selling things he doesn't have title to. But the power of attorney, Evelyn started, is void the moment I prove he is using it for fraud, I cut in. But I want them to sign. I want Pierce to transfer the funds. I want Bradley to sign the deed. I want them to commit the crime on paper in front of witnesses with the ink dry. I want Pierce to think he has won. I want him to stand on my land and gloat, and then I want to pull the rug out from under both of them. Evelyn was silent for a moment. Then she chuckled a dry, dark sound. You are setting a trap. I am not setting a trap, Evelyn. I am building a cage, and on Friday, the rats are going to walk right into it. I started the engine. The anger was gone. In its place was a terrifying clarity. My son had made his choice. He had chosen the enemy. Now he would share the enemy's fate. I drove away, leaving Bradley to his celebration. Enjoy it, son, I thought. It is the last happy moment you are going to have for a very, very long time. I sat in the silence of my truck, parked on a bluff overlooking the sound. The water below was gray and choppy, mirroring the turmoil that had finally settled into a cold, hard sheet of ice within my chest. For the last hour, I had replayed every memory of Bradley's life. I saw the 6-year-old boy who broke a neighbor's window, and I saw myself writing a check to fix it so he wouldn't get in trouble. I saw the teenager who got a DUI. And I saw myself hiring the lawyer to wipe the record clean so his future wouldn't be tarnished. I saw the college dropout who needed seed money for a business that never launched, and I saw myself signing the withdrawal slip. I realized then, with the clarity of a man standing amidst the wreckage of a collapsed bridge, that I was the architect of this disaster. I had treated my son like a delicate structure that needed constant reinforcing. I had shielded him from the wind, from the rain, from the weight of his own choices. And because I never let him feel the strain, he never developed the strength to carry it. He was hollow. A facade of a man, painted to look like marble but filled with rot. And now that rot was threatening to consume everything I had built. Not just the money. Money is just paper and numbers. He was selling our name. He was selling my integrity to a man like Gordon Pierce. He was selling the future of my grandson. I looked at my hands. They were trembling, not from age, not from fear, but from a rage so profound it felt like a physical weight. I took a deep breath, inhaling the salt air, and when I exhaled, the trembling stopped. The father in me, the one who forgave, the one who excused the one who bailed out, died in that moment. What remained was the engineer. And the engineer knew that when a building is structurally unsound, you do not patch the cracks. You condemn it. You strip it down to the studs. You force it to bear weight. And if it collapses, you let it collapse so you can build something real on the ruins. I was not going to save Bradley King. I was going to break him. I put the truck in gear and drove to the brokerage firm where I kept my personal retirement accounts. These were not the funds Bradley knew about. These were the bonds I had bought 30 years ago, the blue-chip stocks I had accumulated quietly, intending to use them for travel with Catherine. Now they would serve a different purpose. I walked into the office and requested an immediate liquidation. The broker, a man named Henderson, who had managed my portfolio for a decade, looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Mr. King," he said, adjusting his glasses, "the market is down. If you liquidate now, you are taking a significant hit. And the tax implications. Are you sure you want to move this much cash? I am not buying a boat. Henderson, I said, my voice flat. I am buying a lesson. Wire the funds to the escrow account at Evelyn Shaw's firm. Mark it for immediate transfer. I watched him type the commands. I watched my life savings, the cushion I had built for my old age, vanish from the screen. It was terrifying. It was liberating. I was pushing all my chips to the center of the table. I was betting everything on my ability to outsmart my own son. Once the transfer was confirmed, I called Evelyn. The money is there, I said. I received the notification, she replied. You are officially the sole investor in Nemesis LLC. We have already contacted the bank holding Bradley's mortgage and the credit card debt. They were more than happy to unload a non-performing asset. As of 10 minutes ago, Wallace, you are the bank. Good, I said. Now I want you to prepare the second phase. What is phase 2, she asked. The acceleration clause, I said. Most mortgages have a clause that allows the lender to demand full repayment immediately if they detect fraud or if the property is being used for illegal activities. Bradley used a forged deed to get that loan. That is fraud. You want to call the loan, Evelyn asked. Not yet, I said. I want the paperwork ready. I want the foreclosure notice drafted, stamped, and ready to be served. But I am not serving it to his house. I am going to serve it to him personally. Where at the closing, I said. On Friday. When he sits down with Gordon Pierce to sign away my farm. I want to be the one to hand him the bill. Evelyn was silent for a moment. That is cruel, Wallace. That is biblical. It is necessary, I replied. He thinks he is a player in the big game. I am just showing him the rules. I hung up and drove to the cemetery. I needed to talk to Catherine. The sun was high now, casting harsh shadows across the granite headstones. I knelt by her grave, pulling a few weeds from around the base of the stone. I am sorry, Kathy, I whispered to the cold earth. I promised you I would take care of him. I promised you I would keep him safe. But I failed. I kept him too safe. I made him into a monster who would sell our home for a seat at a table where he doesn't belong. I touched the letters of her name engraved in the stone. I have to hurt him to save him, Kathy. I have to be the villain in his story, so he can finally become the hero in his own. If he hates me for the rest of his life, so be it. But I will not let him drag Tyler down with him. I will not let him sell your roses to Gordon Pierce. I stood up, dusting the dirt from my knees. A strange sense of calm washed over me. The decision was made. There was no going back. I was no longer a victim of my son's greed. I was the instrument of his reckoning. I drove back to town, but I didn't go home. I went to a hardware store. I walked down the aisles smelling the familiar scents of lumber and oil. I bought a new padlock, a heavy-duty hardened steel lock with a short shackle that couldn't be cut with bolt cutters. Then I drove to the farm. My farm. The place Bradley thought he was selling on Friday. I drove to the main gate, the one that led to the pasture Pierce wanted to turn into a parking lot. I got out of the truck and wrapped a heavy chain around the gate posts. I clicked the new padlock shut. I gave it a tug. It held firm. Let them come, I said aloud to the empty fields. Let them bring their surveyors and their architects. Let them bring their checkbooks and their lies. This is my land, and before they take a single inch of it, they are going to have to go through me. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It was Wednesday evening. 48 hours until the closing. 48 hours until the trap snapped shut. I went back to the house, made a pot of strong coffee, and sat on the porch. I watched the fireflies dancing in the twilight. I wasn't waiting for death anymore. I was waiting for Friday. And for the first time in years, I felt completely dangerously alive. The transformation was complete. Wallace, the retiree, was gone. Wallace, the retribution, had arrived. Thursday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The sky over Connecticut was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind of day that begs for a barbecue or a drive along the coast. But inside my study, the atmosphere was as cold and sterile as an operating room. I was not looking at the view. I was looking at the glowing monitors of my computer setup, where the digital dissection of my son's life was about to begin. I had spent a lifetime building things. I knew how to pour foundations, how to weld steel, how to calculate load-bearing limits. But today I was engaged in the opposite process. I was becoming a demolition expert. And like any good demolition, the key was not the explosion itself, but the weakening of the structural supports, so that gravity would do the rest. Evelyn had worked through the night. I knew this because the emails had come in timestamps that spoke of insomnia and ruthless efficiency. 200 a.m., 3:15 a.m., 4:45 a.m. Each attachment was a weapon. By 8 a.m., the shell company, which we had legally named the Foundation, LLC, was fully operational. It was a faceless entity, a ghost in the financial machine, and as of this morning, it was the legal owner of every debt Bradley King had ever accrued. I took a sip of black coffee and opened the first file. It was the master control for the credit freeze. Bradley lived his life on credit. He didn't own his lifestyle. He rented it at high interest rates. He had 5 major credit cards, each maxed out to the limit to fund the illusion of success. The platinum card for travel. The black card for dinners. The store cards for the designer suits he wore to meetings where he sold lies. I moved my cursor to the administrative panel provided by the bank. Because I had purchased the debt portfolio, I had the right to review the risk assessment. And because I held the original power of attorney, the one he had forged, but which was still technically active in the banking system, until I declared otherwise, I had administrator access. I didn't just cut the cards. That would be too simple. I flagged them for fraud review. I clicked the first box. The American Express. Status active. I selected the option for security freeze. Reason, suspicious activity. I imagined Bradley at that very moment. It was breakfast time. He would be at his favorite cafe in downtown Greenwich, the one where coffee cost $8 and the baristas knew him by name. He would be ordering a macchiato and a croissant, smiling at the people around him, projecting the image of the relaxed, wealthy entrepreneur. He would reach for his wallet. He would tap the card, and the machine would beep. A small red light. Declined. He would laugh it off. He would say it was a chip error. He would pull out the second card. The Visa signature. I moved my mouse, click. Visa signature frozen. He would try the MasterCard. Click, frozen. He would try the debit card attached to the joint account, the one he used to drain the education trust. I paused on this one. This was the vein that connected directly to the stolen money. I typed in the command to lock the account for internal audit. This didn't just stop the card, it froze the cash. He wouldn't be able to withdraw a single dollar. He wouldn't be able to transfer funds to cover the embarrassment. He would be standing at the counter, a man in a $2,000 suit, unable to pay for a cup of coffee. But the credit cards were just the surface. I was going deeper. I opened the file on the cars. Bradley and Monica drove matching Range Rovers. Leased, of course. Leases that were 3 months behind on payments. The bank had been lenient because of the King name, because they assumed the money was there. But the Foundation, LLC, was not lenient. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the repossession agency Evelyn had contracted. A man with a gravelly voice answered on the first ring. "This is Mr. King," I said, keeping my voice devoid of emotion. "I am calling on behalf of the Foundation. We have acquired the notes on 2 vehicles at 450 Elm Street. I have the paperwork right here," the man said. "We were waiting for the go-ahead." "You have it," I said. "But I have a specific instruction. Do not take them from the driveway." There was a pause. "Where do you want us to take them from? He has a meeting tomorrow at noon," I said. At the Prestwick office park. The vehicles will be in the visitor lot. I want you to take them then. In the middle of the day. When the lot is full. I heard the man chuckle. That is cold, buddy. I like it. I hung up. Taking the cars from the driveway was a private inconvenience. Taking them from a business meeting was a public declaration of bankruptcy. It was psychological warfare. I wanted Gordon Pierce to look out the window and see his partner's car being hooked up to a tow truck. I wanted the doubt to creep in before I even walked into the room. Next came the club membership, the Greenwich Country Club. It was the center of their social universe. It was where Monica held her charity lunches and where Bradley played golf with potential marks. It was also where they ran up a monthly tab of $4,000 for dining and events. I drafted a formal letter from the foundation to the club's board of directors. It was a notice of lien. We were informing the club that the member Bradley King was under financial investigation for insolvency. In accordance with the club's bylaws, any member facing bankruptcy proceedings had their privileges automatically suspended to protect the club's liability. I hit send. By this afternoon, the guard at the gate would have a new name on his clipboard. When Monica tried to drive in for her tennis lesson, the gate wouldn't open. She would have to reverse her car in front of her friends. She would have to explain why the scanner wasn't working. The cracks in the facade were spreading, running through every aspect of their curated existence. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the room pressing against my ears. It was terrifyingly easy. In the span of an hour, I had dismantled the infrastructure of their lives. Without money, without credit, without status symbols, who were they? They were children playing dress-up in clothes that didn't fit. But the final piece of the blockade was the most important. It was the communication blackout. Usually when banks take these actions, they send emails, text messages, and certified letters. I needed to ensure Bradley didn't see those warnings until it was too late. I needed him to walk into the closing on Friday blind. I logged into the family mobile plan. This was the only account I still paid for, openly a relic of the days when I wanted to make sure my grandchildren could always reach me. Because I was the account holder, I had access to the settings. I didn't turn off their phones. That would alert them. Instead, I activated the parental control features. I set up a filter on Bradley and Monica's numbers. All incoming calls from numbers not in their contacts would be diverted to voicemail. All text messages containing keywords like bank, alert, fraud, declined, or suspension would be silently archived without triggering a notification. It was a digital cage. The world would be trying to scream at them that their house was on fire, but they wouldn't hear a sound. They would only hear the silence of their own arrogance. I watched the screen as the settings updated. Done. Now they were truly isolated. They were walking toward a cliff edge, and I had just removed the warning signs. My eyes drifted to the corner of my desk to a framed photograph of Tyler. He was 7 years old, in the picture, holding a fishing rod, smiling a genuine gap-toothed smile. My heart gave a painful lurch. This was for him. I had to remind myself of that. Every click of the mouse, every frozen account was a brick in the wall I was building to protect him. I opened one last window. It was a new trust fund I had established yesterday with Evelyn. This one was different. It was irrevocable. It was blind. And the trustees were not family members. They were a board of independent fiduciaries. I transferred the remainder of my liquid assets into it. This money was for Tyler's tuition, for his first apartment, for his future. But the stipulation was strict. Not a single cent could be released if his parents had any access to it. If Bradley or Monica ever attempted to touch this money, the trust would automatically dissolve and donate the entire sum to a charity for stray dogs. I authorized the transfer. The money left my account. I was now on paper a relatively poor man. I had spent my fortune buying my son's debt and securing my grandson's future. I had no cash. I had no savings. All I had was a mountain of promissory notes and the deed to a farm that was about to be the site of a war. The phone rang. It was Evelyn. "It is done," she said. "The liens are recorded at the county courthouse. The foundation is now the primary lien holder on the Greenwich property. We are ahead of the other creditors by 6 hours." "Did the notices go out?" I asked. "They went out," she confirmed. "But per your instruction, the physical copies were mailed to your address since you are the power of attorney. Bradley won't see a piece of paper until you hand it to him." "Excellent," I said. "Wallace," she said, her voice softening slightly. "You know that once this starts, it is going to be messy. When the cards decline, when the gates don't open, they are going to panic. They are going to come to you." "I know," I said. "What are you going to say?" "I am going to say nothing," I replied. "I am going to let them stew in it. I want them to feel the walls closing in. I want them to wonder why the world has suddenly turned against them. And then tomorrow at the closing, I will answer every question they have." I hung up. The sun had moved across the sky. It was noon. The campaign was complete. The blockade was absolute. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the long driveway of my farm, the dust dancing in the light. Somewhere in Greenwich, Bradley was probably trying to pay for lunch. He was probably staring at a card reader, confused, annoyed, maybe a little embarrassed. He would call the bank, but he wouldn't get through because I had changed the security questions. He would call his wife, but she would be having the same problem. They would think it was a glitch, a system error, a mistake. They wouldn't realize that it was Judgment Day. I walked to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. I ate it standing up, feeling the adrenaline humming in my blood. I had 24 hours to wait. 24 hours to watch the panic set in from a distance. I checked the GPS tracker on my truck, or rather the app that tracked the family cars. I saw Bradley's Range Rover moving. It was heading toward his office. Then it stopped. Then it turned around. It was heading toward the bank. I smiled. "Run, Bradley. Run to the bank. Scream at the tellers. Demand to speak to the manager. It won't matter. The manager answers to the foundation now. And the foundation does not negotiate with terrorists." I washed my plate and dried it. Everything was ready. The trap was set, the bait was taken, and the cage was locked. Now all that was left to do was wait for the prey to walk into the center of the room. Tomorrow I would wear my best suit. Tomorrow I would look Gordon Pierce in the eye. Tomorrow I would take back my name. But for today I would simply enjoy the silence. The beautiful, heavy silence of a debt finally coming due. The restaurant was called Le Jardin. It was the kind of place where the menus had no prices, and the water was imported from glaciers that no longer existed. It was the crown jewel of Greenwich, dining a theater of wealth, where the audience was just as important as the food. Tonight, my son Bradley and his wife Monica were the stars of the show, or at least they thought they were. I knew exactly where they were sitting. Table 4. It was the best tables in the house, positioned right by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the manicured courtyard and the valet parking area. I knew this because I had access to their reservation confirmation, which had popped up in the family cloud account before I locked them out. They were hosting the Van Dorens, a couple whose approval Monica had been chasing for 3 years. The Van Dorens were old money. They were the gatekeepers of the summer gala committee. If Monica could impress them tonight, she was in. I was not there physically. I was sitting in my dark study miles away, staring at the notification feed from the credit monitoring service. But I could see the scene as clearly as if I were a fly on the wall. I knew my son. I knew his arrogance. And I knew exactly how hard the floor was about to hit his face. Bradley would be holding court, leaning back in his chair, swirling a glass of the 1982 Bordeaux he had undoubtedly ordered to show off. The bottle cost $3,000. He would be laughing a little too loudly, talking about his new partnership with Gordon Pierce, dropping phrases like leverage and asset allocation to sound sophisticated. Monica would be hanging on his every word, her smile tight, her eyes scanning the room to make sure everyone saw them dining with the Van Dorens. They ordered everything. I saw the transaction attempt come through on the banking alert system before the waiter even printed the check. Beluga caviar, Wagyu beef, white truffles shaved over pasta that cost more than a mortgage payment. They were feasting on the corpse of my finances. They were celebrating the sale of my farm before the ink was even dry. The dinner lasted 2 hours. 2 hours of my son playing the role of the benevolent tycoon. 2 hours of Monica preening like a peacock. They were high on the fumes of a success that wasn't theirs. Then came the moment of truth. The bill. I imagined the waiter, a man named Henri, who had served me many times over the years, placing the black leather folder on the table with a polite nod. The bill was $5,600, a staggering amount for a Tuesday night dinner. But to Bradley, it was just a number. It was just another charge to be absorbed by the bottomless pit of the King Family Trust. Bradley didn't even look at it. He wanted to project total nonchalance. He slid his Platinum American Express card into the folder and handed it back without breaking eye contact with Mr. Van Doren. "I got this," he would have said. "Please, I insist." Henri took the folder and walked to the terminal station near the kitchen. This was the moment. The invisible signal traveled from the card reader through the fiber optic cables bouncing off a satellite and landing squarely in the fraud prevention server of the Foundation LLC. The server checked the status. Status frozen. Action decline. Code 05. Do not honor. Henri walked back to the table. He didn't have the polite smile anymore. He leaned down, whispering discreetly so as not to embarrass the guest. "Sir, the card was declined. Perhaps it is a chip error. Do you have another?" Bradley laughed. It was a nervous, incredulous laugh. "Declined. That is impossible. I just paid for flights to Paris on that card." "Run it again." "I am afraid the system is quite clear," Sir Henry said, his voice dropping a degree in temperature. "It says, do not honor." Bradley's smile faltered. He could feel the eyes of the Van Dorens on him. He reached for his wallet, his fingers fumbling slightly. "Here, try the Visa signature. It has a $50,000 limit. It must be a glitch with Amex." Henri took the second card. He walked away. The table was silent now. The conversation about summer homes and charity galas had died. Mrs. Van Doren took a sip of water, her eyes darting away. The air was thick with that specific, suffocating tension that arises when money becomes an issue among the wealthy. Henri returned faster this time. He didn't whisper. He placed the card on the table. "Declined, sir." Bradley's face turned a shade of crimson that matched the drapes. He stood up, knocking his napkin to the floor. "This is ridiculous. Your machine is broken. I am Bradley King. My father is Wallace King. Call your bank." "We have called the merchant services," Sir Henry said, his voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "The cards are reported as lost or stolen. The issuer has instructed us to retain them." "Stolen," Bradley sputtered. "I am standing right here," Monica jumped in. She was panic-stricken. She opened her Chanel clutch, her hands shaking so hard her lipstick rolled out onto the table. "Here, use mine. Use the joint card. Just pay it." She handed over the debit card, the lifeline. The card connected to the cash I had frozen that morning. Henri looked at it with disdain. He swiped it. The machine at the station let out a long, high-pitched beep. It was the sound of rejection. It was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. "Insufficient funds," Henri announced. The restaurant had gone quiet. The other diners, the elite of Greenwich, were watching. They were whispering. The facade was cracking piece by piece. Bradley King, the marketing genius. The son of the great engineer, couldn't pay for his dinner. But the night was not over. The universe orchestrated by my hand had one more blow to deliver. Outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows flashing yellow lights suddenly illuminated the courtyard. Blue and red shadows danced across the white tablecloths. A siren chirped short and aggressive. Two massive tow trucks had pulled into the valet circle. They were branded with the logo of the repossession agency. They weren't being subtle. They were blocking the entrance, their diesel engines rumbling like beasts. The valet rushed into the dining room. He looked frantic. He scanned the room and locked eyes with Bradley. "Mr. King! Mr. King! You have to come outside!" Bradley looked like a deer in headlights. What is it now? They are hooking up the Rovers, sir." "The tow truck driver says he has a repossession order. He says the leases are in default." No. No. Bradley scrambled away from the table, forgetting his guests, forgetting the bill. He ran to the window. Monica followed him, pressing her hands against the glass. Outside, it was a scene of industrial violence. A man in a reflective vest was sliding a hook onto the undercarriage of Bradley's pristine black Range Rover. He worked with brutal efficiency. The car was lifted into the air, its alarm screaming into the night lights flashing in a panic. Behind it, another truck was already backing up to Monica's white SUV. "Stop!" Bradley screamed, pounding on the thick glass. "You can't do that. That is my car." The diners watched in fascination. It was better than the opera. It was the total public disintegration of a social climber. Mrs. Van Doren stood up, picked up her purse, and signaled to her husband. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't offer to help pay the bill. They simply walked out the side exit, distancing themselves from the contamination of failure. The restaurant manager, a stern man named Pierre, stepped in front of Bradley. He blocked the view of the window. "Mr. King," Pierre said, crossing his arms. "The police are on their way regarding the bill. Unless you have another means of payment, I suggest you wait in the office. We cannot have this disturbance in the dining room." Monica let out a sob. It was a raw, ugly sound. She looked around for someone to save her. She looked at the Van Doren's empty chairs. She looked at the guests at the next table who were deliberately looking at their phones. She realized for the first time in her life that she had no friends. She had only an audience. Bradley turned to the manager. His arrogance was gone. He looked small. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. I can call my father," Bradley stammered. "My father will pay. Just let me call him." He pulled out his phone. He dialed my number. I watched my phone ring on my desk. The screen lit up with his face. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4. The voicemail picked up. "You have reached Wallace King. I am currently unavailable. If this is an emergency, please hang up and handle it yourself." Bradley lowered the phone. The blood had drained from his face completely. He looked out the window again. His car was gone. Monica's car was tilted at a 45-degree angle, being dragged onto the flatbed. The alarm was still blaring, fading into the distance as the truck drove away. They were stranded. They were broke. They were publicly shamed. Pierre, the manager, sighed. "Leave your watches," he said, "and your driver's licenses. You can retrieve them tomorrow when you bring cash. Until then, please leave my establishment." The walk of shame was excruciating. Bradley unclasped his Rolex, the one I gave him for his 30th birthday. Monica took off her diamond earrings. They placed them on the tablecloth like offerings to an angry god. They walked out the front door, not to a waiting valet, but to an empty curb. The cool night air hit them. They had no car. They couldn't call an Uber because their apps were linked to the frozen credit cards. They had to walk. I sat in my study, the silence of the room comforting me. I didn't feel joy. Revenge isn't about joy. It is about balance. For years they had walked over me. Tonight they had to walk home. 6 miles. In dress shoes. I took a sip of my own wine. It wasn't a $3,000 Bordeaux. It was a $20 Merlot. But it tasted better than anything they had consumed tonight. The dinner from hell was over. But the main course was still to come. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow was the closing. And if they thought tonight was bad, they had no idea what was waiting for them in the conference room. Tonight, I took their toys. Tomorrow, I would take their world. The walk from the restaurant was a journey through a personal hell that Bradley had never visited before. Route 1 was not designed for pedestrians, certainly not for pedestrians wearing Italian loafers and 4-inch stilettos. Cars whizzed past at 50 miles an hour, their headlights blinding and invasive, illuminating the humiliating spectacle of the King family trudging along the gravel shoulder. Every step was a reminder of their fall. Monica had stopped complaining about the pain in her feet 10 minutes ago. Now she was just crying. It was a silent, steady stream of tears that smeared her mascara and dripped onto her silk blouse. She held her shoes in her hand, walking barefoot on the cold, dirty asphalt. The woman who had sneered at my Ford truck because it looked like poverty was now literally walking in the dirt. Bradley walked a few paces ahead of her. He was frantically tapping on his phone, trying to find a workaround, a loophole, a hidden account that I hadn't found. The screen illuminated his face in the darkness, highlighting the sweat on his forehead and the sheer terror in his eyes. He looked like a rat trapped in a maze that had suddenly caught fire. I watched their progress on the GPS tracker of Bradley's phone. The dot moved painfully slowly. They were still 3 miles from home. My own phone rang. I had been waiting for this. I sat in my leather armchair, a glass of water on the coaster, the room lit only by the soft glow of a reading lamp. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to imagine the possibility that I was asleep, that I was unreachable, that he was truly alone. On the 4th ring, I picked up. "Hello, Dad?" Bradley's voice was breathless, cracked with panic. "Dad, thank God you picked up." I kept my voice calm, pleasant, the voice of a man who had spent a quiet evening reading a book. "Bradley, it is late. Is everything all right?" "No, Dad. No, everything is not all right. Listen to me. There has been a mistake, a massive computer error at the bank. My cards are down. All of them, even the corporate accounts." "Is that so?" I asked, taking a sip of water. "That sounds inconvenient." "Inconvenient, Dad. It is a disaster. We are stuck. We had dinner with the Van Dorens and the cards declined. They towed the cars, Dad. They took the Rovers." I paused. I let the silence stretch out, forcing him to fill it with his own anxiety. "They took the cars," I repeated slowly. "Well, I suppose that happens when the leases aren't paid. I recall seeing a notice about that in the mail pile a few weeks ago. But you told me you handled it. You said it was administrative." "It was administrative," Bradley screamed into the phone. A passing truck drowned out part of his sentence, leaving only the jagged edges of his hysteria. "It is a glitch, Dad, but I can't fix it until the banks open tomorrow. I need you to wire me some cash, right now. Just enough to get us home and deal with the towing company. 5,000. No, make it 10, just to be safe." I leaned back in my chair. The request was so predicted, so pathetic. $10,000, I mused. That is a lot of money for a glitch, Bradley. "Dad, please, Monica is walking barefoot on the highway. We are humiliated. Just wire the money. You have that emergency account at Chase. I know you do." I sighed. A long, heavy sigh of a tired old man. "I am afraid I can't do that, son." What do you mean you can't?" "You are liquid. You are always liquid." "Not anymore," I said. "You see, Bradley, I have been doing a lot of thinking lately about what you said. About my health. What are you talking about? At the party, I continued, my voice taking on a confused, wandering tone. Or rather, the party I wasn't invited to. You told people I was suffering from cognitive decline. You told the bank I was unfit. Dad, that was just for the loan paperwork. You know that. Well, I took it to heart, I said. If I am losing my mind, I shouldn't be in charge of large sums of money. It is dangerous. So I took your advice. I moved everything. Bradley stopped walking. I could hear his breathing stop. Moved it where I put it in a trust, I said. A blind trust, controlled by a board of directors. Very strict rules. I can't touch the principal without a unanimous vote. And I certainly can't wire $10,000 at 10 o'clock at night to a son who claims to be a millionaire. Dad, stop it. Stop playing games. This is an emergency. It is not an emergency, Bradley. It is a consequence. The word hung in the air between us. Consequence. It was a word he had never truly understood. He thought consequences were things that happened to other people, to poor people, to people who didn't know how to work the system. Dad, listen to me. He hissed, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. If you don't send that money, I swear to God. You swear what? I interrupted, my voice suddenly losing its senile edge. It became sharp, cold. What will you do, Bradley? Will you forge another signature? Will you sell another piece of my land? There was silence on the line. Absolute, terrified silence. He hadn't expected me to know. He thought he was operating in the shadows. Now he realized the lights had been on the whole time. You know, he whispered. I know that you are selling the farm to Gordon Pierce tomorrow, I said. I know about the rezoning application. I know about the patent transfer. I know it all, Bradley. Dad, wait. I can explain. It is a business deal. It is for the family. We are going to make millions. I was going to cut you in. I was going to surprise you. You certainly surprised me, I said. But here is the reality, son. The bank is closed. My accounts are locked. And you are standing on the side of the road in the dark. Dad, please. Monica is bleeding. We can't walk home. Then crawl, I said. Dad. And Bradley, I added, my voice dropping to a whisper. One more thing. What he sobbed. Keep walking. The night air is good for you. But be careful when you get to the bridge. The shoulder is narrow there. And I would hate for you to have an accident before our meeting tomorrow. I hung up. I placed the phone face down on the desk. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. I had just cut the last rope. I had just told him that I knew his secret, but I hadn't told him about the foundation. I hadn't told him that I owned his debt. I left him in the dark, literally and metaphorically. Now his mind would do the work for me. As he walked those last 3 miles, every shadow would look like a threat. Every car that passed would look like a police cruiser. He would wonder how much I knew. He would wonder if I had called the cops. He would wonder if Gordon Pierce knew. He would spend the next 12 hours in a state of absolute agonizing paranoia. He wouldn't sleep. He would pace the floor of his dark house, unable to turn on the lights, because the electricity might be cut next. He would try to formulate a plan, but his brain, accustomed to the easy path, would short-circuit. He would think that the closing tomorrow was his only way out. He would convince himself that if he could just sign the papers, if he could just get Pierce's money, he could fix everything. He could pay me back. He could bribe me into silence. He would cling to the deal like a drowning man clinging to an anchor, and that was exactly what I wanted. I stood up and walked to the window. The moon had risen, casting a pale light over the fields of my farm. Tomorrow those fields would be the battlefield. Tomorrow my son would try to sell my soul. I checked the time. 11 p.m. I went to the closet and pulled out my suit. Not the gray one I wore to church. The black one. The one I wore to board meetings when I had to fire people. I brushed the lapels. I checked the buttons. I was ready. The phone rang again. It was Bradley. I didn't pick up. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. I turned off the ringer. I went to the kitchen and made a sandwich for Tyler. He would be coming over tomorrow after school. I wanted to make sure there was food for him. Real food. Not the catered garbage his parents bought. As I sliced the bread, I thought about the walk Bradley was enduring. I hoped it hurt. I hoped every step reminded him of the steps I took to build this life. I hoped the darkness scared him, because when the sun came up, he was going to wish he was back in the dark. The light of the truth was going to burn him alive. The sun rose over the farm on Friday morning with a brutal, exposing clarity. It was the kind of light that leaves no shadows for secrets to hide in. I was sitting on the porch swing, a mug of black coffee in my hand, watching the dust motes dance in the air. Inside the house, Tyler was still asleep on the sofa, safe and oblivious. I had told him to stay home from school today. I told him there was going to be a family meeting, and I wanted him to see the truth, not the sanitized version his parents fed him. At 8 o'clock, the taxi arrived. It was a beat-up yellow sedan that rattled as it idled at the end of my long driveway. It didn't pull in because it couldn't. The heavy chain and the hardened steel padlock I had installed were doing their job. I watched as the back doors opened. Bradley and Monica stepped out. They looked like refugees from a failed coup d'etat. They were wearing the same clothes from the night before, but the glamour had been stripped away. Bradley's suit was wrinkled and stained with sweat. His tie was missing. Monica was barefoot, holding her expensive heels in one hand, her silk dress torn at the hem. Her hair, usually a helmet of hairspray, hung limp and frizzy around her face. They didn't look humble. They didn't look sorry. They looked furious. The taxi driver argued with them for a moment, likely demanding cash they didn't have. Bradley threw his watch through the window, the Rolex I had given him, and the taxi sped off, kicking up a cloud of gravel. They turned toward the house. When they saw the chain on the gate, Bradley kicked it. He screamed a raw, primal sound of frustration that scared the crows from the telephone lines. "Dad. Open this gate, open it right now." I didn't move. I took a sip of coffee. They had to climb. It was a pathetic sight. My son, the man who wanted to be a real estate mogul, and his wife, the socialite, awkwardly scrambling over a farm fence like common trespassers. Monica snagged her dress on the wire, ripping a long strip of fabric. She cursed loudly, using words that would have made the Van Dorens faint. They marched up the driveway, fueled by a mixture of exhaustion and entitlement. As they got closer, I could see the panic vibrating under their skin. They were running on fumes. The closing with Gordon Pierce was in 4 hours. They needed to sign those papers to get the cash to fix the mess I had made, although they still thought it was a bank error. They stomped up the porch steps. I stayed seated on the swing. "Dad, what the hell is wrong with you?" Bradley shouted, his face inches from mine. He smelled of stale wine and fear. "Why is the gate locked? Why aren't you answering your phone? Do you have any idea what we went through last night? We walked 6 miles in the dark." I looked him up and down. "Exercise is good for the heart, Bradley." "Don't you dare invoke my health," Monica snapped. She pushed past Bradley, her eyes wild. "You did this, Wallace. I know you did. You called the bank. You told them some crazy story about fraud. You locked our accounts. How could you? We have a child. We have bills." I set my coffee mug down on the railing. "I didn't lock your accounts because of a story, Monica. I locked them because you stole from me." Bradley's face twitched. He immediately shifted gears. The anger was replaced by a slippery, condescending tone. The gaslighting began. "Stole, Dad? Nobody stole anything. You are confused. This is exactly what we were worried about. You are forgetting things. You signed those papers. You gave me power of attorney. You told me to manage the trust fund because you were worried about your memory. Don't you remember? I stared at him. He was lying with such conviction that for a second, just a split second, I understood how he had gotten away with it for so long. He didn't just lie to me. He lied to himself. I never told you to drain Tyler's college fund, I said quietly. We didn't drain it, Bradley insisted, waving his hands. We reallocated it. It is an investment strategy. We put it into a high-yield vehicle so it would grow faster. We were doing it for Tyler. We were doing it for you. For me, I asked. Yes, for you, Monica chimed in, her voice shrill. Look at this place, Wallace. It is falling apart. You can't manage a farm at your age. We took out the loan on the house to fix it up to make it sellable so we could move you into a nice facility where you would be taken care of. We are trying to save you from yourself, and you repay us by freezing our assets. You are sick, Wallace. You are paranoid, and you are hurting the people who love you most. It was a masterclass in manipulation. In their twisted narrative, they were the heroes. They were the burdened caregivers dealing with a senile, ungrateful old man. They had convinced themselves that robbing me was an act of mercy. The closing is at noon, Dad, Bradley said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Listen to me. We can fix this. Just call the bank. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Unlock the cards. If we don't show up with the funds to cover the closing costs, the deal falls through. And if the deal falls through, we all lose. This deal with Pierce, it is going to set us up for life. It will pay for Tyler's college. It will pay for your retirement. Gordon Pierce, I said. You are selling my land to Gordon Pierce. Bradley flinched. He hadn't expected me to say the name. He is a changed man, Dad. He respects you. He wants to honor your legacy. Honor my legacy. I stood up slowly. The swing creaked. By bulldozing my home and building a strip mall, by taking my patents and selling them to the lowest bidder, who told you that Bradley demanded looking around as if the trees had ears. That is a lie. Someone is poisoning your mind against us. You are not thinking clearly. I am thinking more clearly than I have in years, I said. Monica stepped forward. She grabbed my arm. Her fingernails dug into my skin. Stop being selfish, Wallace. This isn't about you anymore. It is about the family. If you don't unlock those accounts right now, we are going to lose the house in Greenwich. Do you want your grandson to be homeless? Is that what you want? You are a cruel, bitter old man holding on to dirt when you could be helping your family. You talk about family, I said, pulling my arm away. But you didn't invite family to the party. You talk about Tyler, but you used him as a prop. That was a mistake, Bradley yelled. We apologized. Why can't you let it go? Why do you have to be so vindictive? You are ruining everything because of a petty grudge. They were relentless. They pounded on my sanity like a hammer. If I had been weaker, if I hadn't seen the evidence, I might have cracked. I might have believed that I was the villain. But I had the documents. I had the truth. I am not ruining anything, I said. I am just watching it fall. Bradley wiped the sweat from his forehead. He looked at his watch. Dad, please. We are running out of time. Just sign a check. Just give us access for 24 hours. After the deal closes, we will pay you back double. I swear on Mom's grave. Don't you speak her name, I snapped. My voice cracked like a whip, silencing them both. Bradley stepped back, shocked by the sudden ferocity. You want money? I asked. Yes, he breathed. Yes. Just enough to clear the hold. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was the foreclosure notice Evelyn had prepared. I had printed it out this morning. I unfolded it and held it out to him. Here is your money, I said. Bradley grabbed it. He scanned the paper. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He read it again. And again. What? What is this? He stammered. The Foundation. LLC. Who are they? Why do they have the deed? Monica snatched the paper from him. She read it, her face turning ashen. Foreclosure. But we have 30 days. The bank said we have 30 days. The bank sold the note, I said calmly. The Foundation owns your mortgage now, and the Foundation has invoked the acceleration clause due to fraudulent activity. You don't have 30 days. You have until noon. Noon, Bradley whispered. That is the same time as the closing. Coincidence, I said. Or maybe it is karma. You know them, Monica screamed, grabbing my lapels. You know who this Foundation is. You have to talk to them. Tell them to stop. We can pay them after the deal. I looked at her hands on my jacket. I looked into her desperate, greedy eyes. I can't tell them to stop, Monica. Why not? She shrieked. Because they already made their decision. And they don't negotiate with people who fake dementia diagnoses to rob their parents. Bradley stared at me. The gears in his head were grinding, trying to put the pieces together. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. He looked at the confidence in my stance. Dad. He whispered, a dawn of horror breaking over his face. Who runs the Foundation? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Just then, the front door of the farmhouse opened. The screen door slammed shut. Tyler walked out onto the porch. He was wearing his graduation gown. I had asked him to put it on. He looked like a man, not a boy. He held the Patek Philippe watch in his hand. Tyler, Monica gasped. What are you doing here? You should be at school. Tyler looked at his parents. He looked at their torn clothes, their desperate faces. He looked at the foreclosure notice in Monica's hand. I live here now, Tyler said. His voice was steady. Grandpa invited me, since you guys were too busy selling my college fund to notice. Tyler, baby. Listen. Monica started putting on her motherly mask. Grandpa is confusing you. We are doing this for you. Stop lying, Mom, Tyler said. Just stop. I heard everything. I heard you outside. You didn't come here to see me. You came here for money. Bradley stepped toward him. Tyler, give me the watch. That is valuable. We can pawn it to cover the closing costs. Give it to me. He reached for his son. He reached for the last thing of value I had given the boy. That was the moment the conversation ended. That was the moment the physical war began. I stepped between them. I put my hand on Bradley's chest. Don't touch him, I said. Bradley shoved me. It was a desperate, flailing shove, but it caught me off guard. I stumbled back against the porch railing. Get out of my way, old man, Bradley shouted. He lunged for Tyler. I saw red. All the years of patience, all the years of sacrifice evaporated. I wasn't his father anymore. I was the wall protecting my grandson. I planted my feet. I grabbed Bradley by the lapels of his ruined suit. I used the momentum he had taught me when I wrestled with him in the yard 30 years ago. I twisted. I pulled. And I threw my son off the porch. He landed hard in the dirt of the flower bed, right on top of the hydrangeas. He groaned, rolling over, clutching his ribs. Monica screamed. I stood at the top of the stairs, breathing hard, adjusting my cuffs. Get off my property, I said. And this time I wasn't asking. I was declaring war. The gaslighting was over. The fire was lit, and they were standing right in the center of the flames. The silence that followed the sound of my son hitting the dirt was absolute. The birds had stopped singing. The wind seemed to hold its breath. Even Monica, who usually had a scream for every occasion, was frozen with her mouth open, staring at her husband, lying amidst the crushed blue hydrangeas. I stood on the porch, my hands still raised, my chest heaving. I looked at my palms. They were calloused, rough like sandpaper. They were the hands of a man who had built bridges across raging rivers. Bradley's hands, which were currently clutching his bruised ribs, were soft. They were hands that had never held anything heavier than a golf club or a fountain pen. In that moment, the difference between us wasn't just generational. It was fundamental. I was made of iron and earth. He was made of paper and pretense. Bradley groaned, rolling onto his side. Dirt smeared his expensive dress shirt. He spat out a mouthful of soil. He looked up at me, and for the first time in his life, I didn't see arrogance. I saw shock. He couldn't process that the old man, the silent financier, the doormat he had walked over for 40 years, had just physically rejected him. You assaulted me," Bradley wheezed, struggling to his knees. His voice was a mixture of pain and disbelief. "You crazy old man. I could have you arrested. I could have you thrown in a cell." "Call them," I said, my voice low and dangerous like a rumbling engine. "Call the police, Bradley. Let them come. Let them see the foreclosure notice in your hand. Let them see the trespassers on my land. Let them see the man who faked a medical document to steal from his father. Please make the call." Bradley froze. He knew he couldn't call. The police were the last people he wanted involved. Monica rushed to him, dusting off his jacket with frantic, jerky movements. "Are you okay?" "Oh my God, look at your suit. Wallace, have you lost your mind? You could have killed him." I ignored her. I turned to Tyler. My grandson was standing by the door, his face pale. He was clutching the Patek Philippe watch so hard his knuckles were white. He looked at his father in the dirt, then at me. "Go inside, Tyler," I said gently. "You don't need to see this." "No," Tyler said. I looked at him surprised. The boy who usually retreated to his room, who usually put on headphones to drown out the fighting, was standing his ground. He took a step forward, descending the first step of the porch. "No, Grandpa. I am not going inside. I am not a kid anymore." "Tyler, honey," Monica said, her voice trembling with that manipulative sweetness. "Please, just give Daddy the watch. We need to go. We have a meeting. This is all a big misunderstanding. We will buy you a new watch, a better one, an Apple Watch. Just give us the old one so we can fix this mess." Tyler looked at his mother. It was a look of profound disappointment. It wasn't anger. It was pity. And that pity hit Monica harder than any slap could have. "It is not about the watch, Mom," Tyler said. His voice cracked, then steadied. "You still don't get it, do you? You are trying to sell Grandpa's farm. You are trying to sell his patents. And you are trying to use my college fund to pay off your gambling debts." Bradley scrambled to his feet. "Who told you that?" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "He told you lies. He is poisoning you against us." "I saw the bank statements," Dad, Tyler shouted. The raw emotion in his voice echoed off the barn walls. "I saw the emails on your iPad. You left it unlocked on the kitchen counter last week. I saw the emails from Mr. Pierce. I saw the emails from the casino. I saw everything." The revelation hit Bradley like a physical blow. He staggered back. His own son knew. The carefully curated image of the successful businessman, the role model, the provider, it was all shattered. Tyler continued, tears streaming down his face. "I was so proud of you, Dad. I told my friends my dad was a marketing genius, but you are just a liar. You stole from Grandpa. You stole from me. And now you want to steal this watch. This is the only thing I have that is real." "Shut up," Bradley screamed. The vein in his neck bulged. "Shut your mouth, you ungrateful little brat. I did everything for you, the private schools, the tutors, the camps. Do you think that was free? Do you think money grows on trees? I did what I had to do to survive." "You didn't do it for me," Tyler yelled back. "You did it for you. You did it so you could brag to your friends at the club." That was the breaking point. The truth was too bright, too hot. Bradley snapped. The facade of the civilized man dissolved, leaving only a cornered, vicious animal. "Give me the watch," Bradley roared. He lunged. Not at me. He lunged at Tyler. It happened in slow motion. I saw my son, a grown man of 40, charge at his own teenage child, with violence in his eyes. He wasn't reaching out to hug him. He was reaching out to take to hurt, to silence the voice that was speaking the truth. Monica screamed, covering her mouth. Tyler flinched, raising his arms to protect his face. But Bradley never reached him. I moved. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I just moved. My body remembered the leverage and torque of the construction site. I stepped down from the porch, cutting off Bradley's path. As he reached for Tyler, I caught his wrist. My grip clamped down on his forearm like a steel vise. I felt his pulse hammering under my thumb. I felt the softness of his skin, the weakness of his bone structure. I didn't just hold him. I twisted. I utilized a simple mechanics principle: torque. I rotated his arm outward, forcing his shoulder joint to lock, forcing his body to follow the pain. Bradley yelped, a high-pitched sound of shock. He tried to pull away, but I stepped into his space, using my shoulder to drive him backward. I slammed him against the rough wooden pillar of the porch. The impact shook the roof. Dust fell from the eaves. I pinned him there. My left forearm pressed against his chest, right below his throat, cutting off his wind just enough to panic him, but not enough to kill him. My right hand still twisted his wrist behind his back. "Dad, stop, you are breaking my arm!" Bradley shrieked, his face pressed against the wood. I leaned in close. My face was inches from his ear. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled sour. "If you ever," I hissed, my voice shaking with a rage that terrified even me, "if you ever raise a hand to that boy again, I will break more than your arm. I will take you apart, Bradley. Do you understand me?" I tightened my grip. "Do you understand?" "Yes. Yes, I understand." "Let go." I held him for another 5 seconds. I wanted him to feel the powerlessness. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be at the mercy of someone stronger. I wanted him to know that the only reason he was still standing was because I was allowing it. I released him. Bradley crumbled to the ground, clutching his arm, gasping for air. He looked up at me with terror. He had forgotten who I was. He had forgotten that before I was a retiree in a cardigan, I was a man who cleared forests and moved mountains. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness. I straightened my jacket. I looked at Monica. She was trembling, staring at me as if I were a monster. "Get him up," I said coldly. Monica rushed forward, helping Bradley to his feet. He was sobbing now, deep, humiliating sobs of a beaten man. "You have 1 hour until your meeting with Gordon Pierce," I said, looking at the sun high in the sky. "You have no money. You have no car. You have no dignity." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Not the keys to the Range Rover. The keys to my old tractor, which was parked by the barn. It was a rusty, loud diesel belching machine from 1984. "Take the tractor," I said. What Monica whispered, horrified. "It is the only vehicle on this property that isn't locked," I said. "If you want to get to your closing, if you want to try to beg Gordon Pierce for mercy, take the tractor. It goes 15 miles an hour. If you leave now, you might just make it." "Dad, you can't be serious." Bradley whimpered, cradling his arm. "Drive a tractor to the office park." "It is that or walk," I said. "And Bradley?" He looked at me, eyes red and swollen. "When you get there, don't worry about the closing costs. The foundation will be there." He froze. "The foundation." "Go," I barked, "before I change my mind and call the sheriff." They didn't argue. They were broken. Bradley limped toward the barn, Monica trailing behind him, looking back at the house, at the life, at the son she had just lost forever. A moment later, the tractor roared to life with a cloud of black smoke. I watched as my son and his wife, the aspiring royalty of Greenwich, climbed onto the rusted metal seat of a farm vehicle. They chugged down the driveway, the engine backfiring a slow, loud parade of shame heading toward the main road. I turned to Tyler. He was still standing on the steps, clutching the watch. He was shaking. I walked over to him and pulled him into a hug. He buried his face in my shoulder and cried. He cried for the loss of his parents, not because they were dead, but because he finally saw who they really were. "It is okay, kid," I whispered, stroking his hair. "It is over. The rot is gone. We can build now." I looked at the retreating cloud of black smoke in the distance. The physical battle was won. But the war wasn't over. The final act was waiting in a conference room 10 miles away. I went inside and grabbed my car keys. I had a meeting to attend, and I wasn't going to be late. The closing was about to begin, and I was bringing the sledgehammer. I pulled my sedan into the parking lot of the Prestwick office park. It was a sterile landscape of glass and concrete, the kind of place where dreams went to be filed in triplicate or shredded. In the center of the visitor lot, looking like a wound on the pristine asphalt, sat my old rusty tractor. It was still smoking slightly. A security guard was walking around it, scratching his head, undoubtedly wondering how a piece of agricultural machinery from the last century had invaded his domain. I walked past him, adjusting my tie. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. The doors opened to the reception area of Prestige Global Realty. It smelled of expensive leather and intimidation. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I didn't slow down. I walked straight to the double oak doors at the end of the hall. I didn't knock. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the air-conditioned silence. The scene inside was a tableau of disaster. Gordon Pierce sat at the head of a massive mahogany table. He looked impatient, checking his gold watch. On the other side sat Bradley and Monica. They were a sight to behold. Dust from the tractor ride coated their faces. Monica's hair was a wind-blown nest. Bradley was holding his injured arm, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder. They smelled of diesel fumes and desperation. When I entered, the air left the room. Bradley stood up, knocking his chair back. "Dad." "What are you doing here, Gordon?" Pierce looked at me. His eyes narrowed. He recognized me instantly. The last time he saw me, I was escorting him off a bridge site with police officers. He didn't smile. He leaned back, tenting his fingers. Wallace King Pierce said, his voice like gravel grinding together. "I was told you were in a nursing home. I was told you were drooling on yourself. You look remarkably lucid for an invalid." I walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. I placed my briefcase down. It made a heavy, solid sound against the wood. "I made a miraculous recovery, Gordon," I said, "just in time to review the paperwork for this transaction." Monica jumped up. Her face was flushed with panic. "You have no right to be here. This is a private meeting." "Gordon, make him leave. He is legally incompetent." "We have the papers." She was still trying to play the hand that had already been folded. She reached into her bag and pulled out the forged power of attorney document. She slammed it on the table. "See," she shrilled. "We have the authority. He is just confused. Sign the check, Gordon. Let's finish this." Pierce looked at the document, then at me. He was a predator, and predators know when the wind changes direction. He didn't sign anything. I opened my briefcase. I didn't rush. I wanted them to feel every second ticking by. I pulled out a thick black binder. I slid it across the table toward Pierce. "Before you sign that check, Gordon, I suggest you look at Exhibit A." "What is this?" Pierce asked, flipping the binder open. "It is a forensic handwriting analysis," I said, "performed by the state's leading expert yesterday afternoon. It compares the signature on that power of attorney with my actual signature from notarized documents over the last 10 years. I looked at Bradley. He had gone pale beneath the layer of dirt on his face. The conclusion is on page 4, I continued. The signature is a tracing, a clumsy one. It matches a document from 1998 perfectly down to the microscopic tremor in the ink flow. That document is a forgery, Gordon, and under Connecticut law, using a forged instrument to transfer real estate is a Class B felony. Pierce looked up from the page. His face darkened. He looked at Bradley. Is this true? No. Bradley stammered. It is a lie. He is lying. I pulled out the next item. A digital recorder. I pressed play. The voice that filled the room was unmistakable. It was Monica's voice recorded by the security system in my kitchen when they thought I was napping 3 weeks ago. We just need to get the old man to sign the blank form. Tell him it is for his medical insurance. Once we have the signature, we can fill in the rest. We can take the house, the accounts, everything. He is too stupid to notice. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Monica made a sound like a wounded animal. She slumped back into her chair, her hands covering her mouth. The defiance was gone. The aggression evaporated. In its place was a cold, trembling terror. She looked at the door, calculating the distance, wondering if she could run. But I wasn't done. I pulled out the bank records. Here are the wire transfers, I said, sliding the papers to Pierce. $250,000 from my grandson's education trust. Transferred directly to your company, Gordon. But here is the problem. Since the power of attorney is void, those funds are considered stolen property. If you accept this land deal today, you are knowingly participating in money laundering. Pierce slammed the binder shut. He stood up, his face purple with rage. He turned to Bradley. You idiot, Pierce hissed. You told me you had clear title. You told me the old man was a vegetable. You brought me a felony. You brought the FBI to my doorstep. Bradley was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face. Mr. Pierce, please. I didn't know. We can fix this. Just give us the money. We will pay him off. We will make him sign a new one. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You can't pay me off, Bradley, because you don't have any money. I stood up and delivered the final blow, the one that would shatter their world completely. I reached into the briefcase one last time. I pulled out the deed. But it wasn't the deed they expected. It was the assignment of mortgage. You see, Gordon, I said, addressing my old enemy, you can't buy the farm from Bradley, because Bradley doesn't own the equity. The bank held the note. And as of yesterday, the bank sold the note to a private holding company called the Foundation LLC. I looked at Monica. Her eyes were wide, staring at me with a dawning horror. She remembered the name from the foreclosure notice. The Foundation, she whispered. You are the Foundation. I nodded. I own the debt, Monica. I own the mortgage on your house in Greenwich. I own the liens on your cars. I own the credit card debt you ran up at this man's bogus investment firm. I own it all. I turned back to Bradley. So here is the situation. The foreclosure on your house is active immediately. The police are currently reviewing the forgery evidence I sent to the district attorney this morning. And Mr. Pierce here, I imagine he is about to throw you out of his office before he gets indicted as a co-conspirator. Monica began to cry. It wasn't the fake crying she used to get her way. This was the real ugly sobbing of a woman watching her life incinerate. She grabbed Bradley's arm, digging her nails in. You said you handled it. She screamed at him, shaking him violently. You said he was stupid. You said we would be rich, now we are going to jail. I can't go to jail. Bradley, I look terrible in orange, she turned to me, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Wallace, please. Dad. I didn't mean it. It was Bradley's idea. He made me do it. He said you owed us. I love you, Wallace. I have always loved you. Please don't send us to prison. Think of Tyler, I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had banned me from my grandson's graduation. The woman who had laughed when she told me I wasn't invited. I am thinking of Tyler, I said. That is why I am doing this. To make sure he never turns into you. Gordon Pierce picked up the phone on the conference table. Security, he barked. Get up here. I have 2 trespassers to remove. And call the police. I want to report an attempted fraud. Bradley fell to his knees. Mr. Pierce, no. Please get out, Pierce roared. Get out of my office before I throw you out the window. I picked up my briefcase. I snapped the latches shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I walked to the door. I didn't look back at my son, who was weeping on the carpet. I didn't look back at Monica, who was hyperventilating. I walked out into the hallway. Behind me, I heard the shouting. I heard the chaos, but I felt only a profound, quiet peace. The truth was out. The lies were dead. The foundation had held firm. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. I had one more stop to make. The police station. But I wasn't going there to turn myself in. I was going there to finish what I started. The automatic doors of the office building slid open, and I stepped out into the harsh glare of the midday sun. The heat radiating off the pavement was intense, but it was nothing compared to the firestorm I had just left behind in Gordon Pierce's conference room. I walked to the edge of the curb and waited. I did not have to wait long. The sound of sirens cut through the corporate silence. It started as a low wail in the distance and grew rapidly into a deafening crescendo. 2 police cruisers, their lights flashing blue and red, screeched into the parking lot. They did not park politely in the visitor spaces. They pulled right up to the front entrance, blocking the exit. I watched as Detective Reed stepped out of the first car. I knew Reed. He was a no-nonsense officer who had worked the fraud division for 20 years. Evelyn had sent the evidence packet to his desk at 9 o'clock this morning. He looked at me and gave a curt nod. He wasn't here for pleasantries. He was here for an arrest. A moment later, the revolving doors spun again. Bradley and Monica stumbled out, pushed from behind by Gordon Pierce's private security guards. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck washing ashore. Bradley was holding his arm, his face streaked with dirt and tears. Monica was trying to smooth her torn dress, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. When they saw the police cars, they stopped dead in their tracks. Officer Monica yelled, pointing a shaking finger back at the building. That man inside assaulted us. Gordon Pierce threatened us. You have to arrest him. Detective Reed walked up to them, his hand resting on his belt. Mrs. King, he said, his voice calm and authoritative. We are not here for Mr. Pierce. We are here for you and your husband. Me? Monica gasped, pressing a hand to her chest in a theatrical display of innocence. I didn't do anything. I am a victim here. Reed pulled a folded paper from his pocket. We have a warrant for the arrest of Bradley King for forgery, bank fraud, and grand larceny. And we have a warrant for you, Monica King, for conspiracy and aiding and abetting a felony. Bradley's knees gave out. He slumped against a concrete planter, sobbing into his hands. It was a pathetic sight. The man who wanted to be a king was now just a frightened child waiting for a timeout that would last 10 years. But Monica did not slump. Monica went into survival mode. I saw the shift in her eyes. It was instantaneous and chilling. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, reptilian calculation. She looked at Bradley huddled on the ground. Then she looked at the handcuffs Reed was unclipping from his belt. She turned to me. Wallace, she said, her voice dropping to a hurried whisper. Wallace, you can stop this. You know I didn't sign those papers. It was Bradley. It was all Bradley. He made me do it. I was scared of him. I looked at her. I remembered the recording of her voice plotting to steal my house. I remembered her laughing about the party. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. It was something far more expensive. Evelyn had prepared this document just in case. It was a voluntary termination of parental rights. I stepped closer to her. The officers paused, watching me. "Monica," I said, "I can't stop the fraud charges. You broke the law. But I can speak to the district attorney. I can tell him that you cooperated. I can tell him that you were a reluctant participant. It might mean the difference between 5 years in prison and probation." Her eyes lit up. Yes, tell him that I will cooperate. I will tell them everything." "There is a price," I said. Anything she breathed. I held up the paper. "You sign this, right now. It grants full permanent legal custody of Tyler to me. You waive all visitation rights. You waive any claim to his future, his trust fund, or his life. You walk away, Monica. You leave my grandson alone forever." She looked at the paper. Then she looked at the back of the police car. It wasn't even a choice for her. There was no hesitation, no tearful glance toward the phantom of her son. There was only the terrifying selfishness that had defined her entire existence. "Do you have a pen?" she asked. I handed her my fountain pen. She took it. She placed the paper on the hood of the police cruiser. In the reflection of the blue lights, she signed her name. She signed away her only child to save her own skin. She handed the paper back to me. "Done," she said. "Now tell them. Tell them I am innocent." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. It felt heavy, not with paper weight, but with the weight of the tragedy it represented. "Detective Reed," I said, "Mrs. King has agreed to turn state's evidence against her husband. She claims she was coerced." Reed looked at Monica with disgust, then nodded. "We will take her statement downtown, but she still has to come in for booking." "I know," I said, "but at least she won't be coming back to my house." Reed turned to his partner. "Cuff him." The partner grabbed Bradley. He hauled him up from the planter. Bradley was limp, barely standing. He looked at Monica. He saw her standing apart from him, her arms crossed, her face turned away. Monica Bradley croaked. "Monica, what are you doing? We are in this together, right?" Monica didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead at the empty parking lot. "You lied to me, Bradley," she said, her voice ice cold. "You said you had the money. You said you had the power. You are nothing, and I am not going to prison for a loser." Bradley screamed. It was a sound that tore through the humidity of the afternoon. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was the sound of a heart breaking. He realized in that second that the woman he had betrayed his father for, the woman he had sold his soul to impress, didn't love him. She never had. She loved the lifestyle he provided, and now that the lifestyle was gone, he was just dead weight. The officers shoved Bradley into the back of the first cruiser. He pressed his face against the window, weeping, watching his wife stand on the sidewalk. Detective Reed opened the door of the second car for Monica. She climbed in with a strange, delusional dignity, as if she were getting into a limousine. She believed she had won. She believed she had outsmarted the system. She didn't realize that by signing that paper, she had lost the only thing that could have ever given her life meaning. I stood on the sidewalk as the cars pulled away. I watched the flashing lights fade into the traffic of the main road. Bradley was going to prison. Monica was going to a life of loneliness and legal battles, and I was standing there holding the freedom of my grandson in my pocket. It was over. The toxic branch had been cut from the family tree. The wound would bleed for a while, but the infection was gone. I walked to my car. My hands were shaking just a little. I wasn't happy. No father is happy to send his son to jail. But I was relieved. I had done the hard thing. I had done the necessary thing. I got in the car and started the engine. I had to get home. Tyler was waiting, and for the first time in 18 years, I didn't have to ask anyone's permission to be his grandfather. I checked the rearview mirror one last time. The office park was empty. The rusty tractor still sat in the lot, a monument to the day the earth reclaimed its own. I put the car in drive. It was time to go home and plant something new. The blue hydrangeas under the porch have finally started to bloom again. They are resilient flowers, much like the people who plant them. It has been 3 months since the sirens faded from the office park, 3 months since the silence returned to my farm. But it is a different kind of silence now. It is not the silence of loneliness. It is the silence of peace. Tyler is in the driveway packing the trunk of my old sedan. He leaves for college tomorrow. He is not going to the Ivy League school his mother wanted him to attend just for the bumper sticker. He is going to Georgia Tech to study civil engineering. He wants to know how things are built. He wants to know how to make things that last. He earned his spot on his own merit, and his tuition is paid for by the irrevocable trust I established the day his father tried to sell him out. I watched him lift a heavy box of books. He has filled out in the last few months. Working on the farm has been good for him. He has calluses on his hands now, just like mine. He knows how to fix a fence. He knows how to change the oil in a tractor. He knows the value of $1 because he has had to earn it, sweat for it, and respect it. I visited Bradley yesterday. The state correctional facility is a gray, soulless place stripping a man of his pretenses faster than any bankruptcy court. He looked thinner. The arrogant shine of the marketing executive was gone, replaced by the hollow look of inmate number 742. He is facing 5 years. Monica took a plea deal, testified against him to save herself, and moved to Florida to look for her next victim. Bradley is alone. He sat behind the glass partition and asked me if I hated him. I looked at my son. Really looked at him for the first time in years. I didn't feel hate. Hate requires energy. I felt a heavy, settled resolve. I don't hate you, Bradley, I told him. I am just disappointed that I didn't let you fall sooner. He asked me when he could come home. He asked if his room would be waiting for him when he got out. I didn't give him the answer he wanted. I didn't give him the soft landing he has expected his entire life. When you get out, I said, you will be 45 years old. You will have a criminal record and empty pockets. You won't be coming back to the farm, Bradley. The farm belongs to Tyler now. It is in his name, protected by a trust you can never touch. He started to cry. He asked me where he would go. I slid a pamphlet through the slot. It was for a trade school that accepts ex-convicts. They teach welding. It is hard work. It is hot work. It pays $20 an hour. You will go there, I said. You will learn a trade. You will work with your hands. And for the first time in your life, you will build something instead of stealing it. If you can do that, if you can show me 5 years of honest tax returns, then maybe we can have coffee. Until then, you have a lot of work to do. I walked away. I didn't look back. A father's job isn't to be a crutch. It is to be a guardrail. Sometimes that means letting your child hit the bottom so they can find their own footing. I walked down the porch steps to where Tyler was standing. He closed the trunk and looked at me. He wasn't wearing the Patek Philippe watch. It was safely locked in the safe deposit box waiting for his graduation from college. On his wrist, he wore a simple, sturdy field watch I had bought him at the hardware store. Ready? I asked. Ready, Grandpa, he said. We stood there for a moment, listening to the wind rustling through the cornfields. The land was safe. The legacy was secure. People often ask me if I regret what I did. They ask how a father could destroy his own son's life. They look at me with judgment, thinking I am cold, thinking I am cruel. They don't understand. I didn't destroy Bradley's life. I stopped him from destroying his soul. I stopped him from becoming a man who would sell his own child's future for a temporary seat at a table where he didn't belong. I put my hand on Tyler's shoulder. We didn't need to say anything. The bond between us was forged in fire. As I watched him drive away to start his new life, I realized the true price of absence. My son thought my absence from his party was an insult. He didn't realize that my absence was the only thing holding his lies together. And when I finally showed up, the truth came with me. Family isn't about whose blood runs in your veins. It isn't about obligation or Sunday dinners or pretending everything is fine when the house is burning down. True family is about the people who respect the foundation you stand on. It is about the people who will protect you when the walls cave in, not the ones who sell the bricks for pocket change. I am Wallace King. I am a builder. And I finally cleared the rubble. The ground is level now. The air is clean. And for the first time in a long time, the view from my porch is beautiful. This is the end of my story, but it is the beginning of my life. If you are listening to this, ask yourself who is sitting at your table, and more importantly, what are they hiding under the tablecloth? Because sometimes the person you need to evict from your life is the one holding the fork next to you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you would have given Bradley a second chance, or if you agree that some bridges are meant to be burned. Until next time, protect your peace and check your bank accounts.